People always ask me, well, not always, but in the past, people have asked me um, about incorporating. And they say, well, why don't you just incorporate? Why don't you just, put your business and tie your business back into the matrix in some form of a way and call up the Secretary of State and go ahead and register with them and just run your business that way and just make money, and just make money and use that money and be sovereign off of that money. And what people don't realize is that you'll never be sovereign that way. You can't do it that way. You can't. There's no way to do it that way. As a natural person, you can't even do business with the corporation unless you do certain experiments. And that's what I'm going to talk about today. You may say experiments. What are you talking about? That's right. You have to do certain experiments to truly do business with the corporation as a sovereign person. You'd have to actually be some form of an executive, believe it or not. So that's what I mean by experiments. And you would have to pretty much have some form of either a partnership agreement with the corporation or you're an executor or executor some kind of way within that corporation. Other than that, there's no way for you to do business with the corporation. It's actually against the law unless you become an employee. That's right, become an employee of that corporation. So when you start thinking about, like, for instance, the U.S. government in one aspect is a corporation. And it was changed and altered. It used to be actually a republic, actually. It used to be an empire at one point even. But it was slowly deteriorated and it changed and was broken down into a corporation. And this happened mainly in the 40s based upon an experiment. And this actually happened by what they thought was a group of extraterrestrials, which actually was a group of extraterrestrials. It was a group of humans that left in the 1800s and came back and crashed into Earth and came back in 1944, somewhere around there. And you know this as the Roswell crash. And I'm going to do my next couple of videos, hopefully, about this topic in regards to corporations and your straw man and getting yourself together and things of that nature, based upon the real way, though. Not based upon any kind of false. See, if you take any kind of fool's gold, you're going to miss the boat. Your social security number, you got to think about it. Like, what do you want to play against these world elites with? You want to bet them dollars and 50 cents and quarters, or do you want to use your social security and take back your social security, which is actually your securities, which is actually your mercantile, your commodities, and take that back, and everybody's worth millions of dollars. You know what I'm saying? Like, it doesn't matter who you are. Once you effectively take this back, but the thing is that as you learn how to take this back, you're going to find yourself interacting with other companies, other corporations, even other sovereigns. You're going to have various different agreements. You're going to be you're going to turn yourself into like a statesperson, a statesman, or a stateswoman. And you're going to be like pretty much like a chief. You're going to be like an officer. You're going to have, not an officer, like a chief. You're going to have an office or some form of a way to regulate all of this. But I can teach you how to do this with very little paperwork and manage this with very little effort. And that's what I'm going to, over time, try to teach you guys how to do this. But all of this corporation stuff, though, came from an experiment that took place from a group of beings that left, like I said, and came back and crashed down and came in and rechanged the government. And eventually, America went off the gold standard. And things began to change, and then fiat notes came into play. So at first, America's money, for instance, was backed by about 70% gold. I think back in the 70s. And by the time the 80s and 90s came, the currency was totally fiat, meaning there was no gold backing. It was sold. And the whole government was changed into kind of like a monopoly game that was controlled by this group of beings that crashed down. And the reason why they use corporations is because they use technology. This is what I'm going to get into in my next video. And they have what's called a supercomputer that controls all corporations. The only person that knows about this and people that know about this are Secretary of States. They're not going to tell you about this because they're up under a strict oath. Every secretary takes an oath, and they're not going to tell you about this. But there's a supercomputer that controls all corporations, right? And this supercomputer is controlled by this group of extraterrestrials. And that's the big secret. Once you can get access to the supercomputer, then you can graduate and begin to start working with corporations and move from a state of being a sovereign and living off the land, kind of like, you know, like the Native Americans did, and living like as a pilgrim, you know, or as a bum or whatever they want to call it. You'll gradually learn how to start living as a ruler, as an elite of your own land, though. Not as an elite controlling people and being a puppet master, but an elite at controlling yourself and generating millions of dollars, well, whether you want to call it pesos or whatever you use, rupees or whatever you use, yen, whatever. But millions of units, we'll just say that. I like to use the term units. Millions of units off of yourself. Because that's really what you were born to do. And off of your social security number. And I don't care if you have a passport or whatever, or off of your military number. Or off of your jacket number if you have a military number. And this is what you were put here to do. As a sovereign and as a spiritual sovereign born into this world, coming through the waters, which is commerce, of your mother's womb, and eventually coming onto land, whether it was a hospital or wherever you came out of your mother's womb, and now you are a full-bred adult. You have a responsibility to manage yourself, because at some point, I'm going to talk about this in the future and shut down, but at some point soon, this thing about this mask thing, they got everybody wearing a mask, this is a play. It's true, it's real as far as people wearing masks and the virus and people dying and all of that. I'm not saying the virus is all the way true, I got to do a video on that. But I'm saying that what's going on is real, but it's a play of something that's even worse that's going to happen. And that's what I'm going to talk about in the future. If you don't take back your straw man, you will not survive this. Because they're going to force you at some point. You won't even be able to come out without the mask. And I'll be talking about that in the future. So I thank you for listening. I thank you for watching. As always, stay vigilant and wise.